Robert Soulby are the world's leading manufacturer of wood-turning tools. Today we also produce wood-turning lathes, lathe accessories, wood-carving tools and specialist chisels. All manufactured to the same high standards at our factory in Sheffield, England, where the company was founded over 200 years ago. In this video, we are going to look at a number of different techniques for decorating turned workpieces. Texturing, spiraling, indexed work featuring carving and inset doweling, chatterwork, and off-center turning. Decorating projects is a fun, simple, and effective way of adding that extra spark of individuality to your work. Let's have a look at the first of these subjects, texturing. These objects all have one thing in common. They have had their surfaces enhanced using the Robert Soulby texturing tool. This is an ingenious tool used by amateur woodturner Tracy Owen to create award-winning designs. It features a cutter with an integral bearing that revolves freely when offered against workpieces to create a myriad of textured effects. These effects are created by presenting the cutter to the workpiece at varying angles. The patterns are affected by the angle of presentation of the cutter, whether the cutter is applied above, on, or below center, the amount of pressure applied, the speed of the rotating project, and the cutter selected. The texture is highlighted by the application of an appropriate finish. In this instance, I have used Robert Soulby Danish oil. The density of the wood used and the figure of the grain also have a major impact on the final result. For instance, the effects on this piece of hard maple are quite defined, but are obscured to an extent by the coloration of the wood. Careful selection of wood will enable the patterns to be shown to their fullest potential. For instance, woods like sycamore, yew, maple and apple will texture well. By experimenting, you will find the woods and patterns that you prefer. Now let us have a look at two texturing projects, the first of which is a hollow form out of burr myrtle. We are going to texture the outside of this hollow form with a striated pattern. To maximise the impact of this effect, the pattern is going to be contained within the rim and foot detail. This will create some interplay between the textured and non-textured surfaces. First of all, position the tool rest at a distance that will allow the free movement of the cutter. Decide whether you want the cutter to be used above, on or below centre. Experience will tell you which is best to create the effect you require. In this case, we are going to work on the centre line with the lathe speed set at about 1000 RPM. Present the cutter to the workpiece at about 30 degrees off vertical, either to the left or the right. Start at the rim and work towards the foot. Maintain cutter contact and the same presentation angle throughout the cut. Remember to leave enough room for the cutter to revolve properly. In this instance I haven't. It hit the rest, so I'll move it back a little. This will allow it to revolve properly. Repeat the process until the required effect is achieved. When the texturing has been completed, we can highlight the effect by the addition of a V-cut using a 1/8 inch parting tool. This creates a crisp intersection between the contrasting areas. Finish the outside of the hollow form using a fine abrasive. Use a very light touch in order not to remove the texture. Finally, apply Danish oil, which seals and protects the surface. You will notice I am using a cloth to apply the finish on the textured areas. Paper towels shred and leave fibres behind. This technique is safe as long as the lathe is not running. The second of our projects is a vase made from sycamore and decorated with an orange peel effect. First of all, profile the external shape. You will see that I am using a high performance spindle gouge. This unique development from Robert Sorby utilises a titanium nitride coating. This in turn increases the cutting edge life by a minimum 3 times. So more time can be spent turning and less time sharpening. Once a satisfactory shape has been achieved, we are ready to apply the orange peel effect. To achieve this pattern, present the cutter vertically to the project. Starting at the neck, traverse the cutter towards the left and right, working towards the foot. Work small sections at a time and overlap the previous section as you proceed. This ensures an even coverage. Repeat the process 2 or 3 times as necessary. Once the required effect is achieved, sand using a fine abrasive, apply an appropriate finish, and part off. Sooner or later it will be necessary to sharpen the cutter. Place the cutter vertically up against the revolving piece of wood. As soon as the cutter starts to revolve, gently touch the bevels with a diamond file. This should restore the cutting edge to perfect condition. Here are the finished articles. They have all had their surfaces enhanced using the Robert Sorby texturing tool. These are just 2 of the vast array of decorative effects which can be achieved by this unique tool. The next topic in this video is spiralling. Up until now, the traditional methods of creating spirals on turned workpieces has been carving or routing. Both of these require a high degree of skill and knowledge, a daunting task for most. Now there is a ready-made solution which enables everyone to create spirals and twists with a minimum of fuss. This is the Robert Sorby spiralling system. It is a development from the concept of the texturing tool. To aid the creation of the spirals, there are different cutters available, each one capable of producing a different spiral profile. The cutter on the left is a spiraling cutter, whereas the cutter on the right is a texturing cutter. This should not be used for the creation of spirals. In addition to the cutters, there is a graduated rest. This is there to help in the creation and the replication of the spirals. This rest has graduated markings on the bridge. In conjunction with this, there is a strike line along the top of the tool shank. By twisting the shank of the tool, the presentation angle of the cutter is altered. This in turn either elongates or shortens the pitch of the spiral. By tightening the machine screws, the shank is clamped into position. Let's have a look at how we use this tool to create spirals. First of all, select a piece of wood with the grain running between centres and rough it down to the required diameter using a roughing out gouge. Spiralling is best undertaken on close-grained woods like this European boxwood or maple and cherry. Select an appropriate cutter. In this case it is the 4mm cutter. Choose an offset position to the left or the right. This will create either left or right-handed spirals. A word of caution. Each cutter has an operating window. If the cutter is moved too far from horizontal, it will texture and not spiral. There needs to be a clear, vertical strike line between the two central teeth. This is shown clearly by using a steel rule and placing it between the two teeth concerned. Position the lathe rest so the spiraling tool can be held horizontally, with the centre of the cutter on the centre line of the cylinder. To start the cut, choose a lathe speed of about 500 RPM. Reposition the tool horizontally on the lathe rest and gently push the cutter to the cylinder. At this point the cutter revolves but does not cut. Raise the handle until the cutter starts to cut. This will be about 10 degrees from the horizontal. Apply gentle pressure for a few seconds and remove the tool. This section of the spiral will act as a reference point. It is a good idea at this time to stop the lathe and look at the spiral. Restart the lathe at about 1000 RPM. Present the tool horizontally to the work. When the cutter revolves, it will relocate into the spiral already cut. Once it has done so, gently raise the handle until it starts to cut and traverse along the work. This creates the spiral. Repeat this procedure until the spiral is fully formed. Remember, it is better to take 2 or 3 light cuts than one heavy cut. Let's put this sequence into practice and spiral a goblet stem. The goblet is going to be turned out of Brazilian purple heart. First of all, profile the internal section of the goblet cup. I'm using a Robert Sorby high-performance spindle gouge. Having achieved the required internal profile, sand and bring up the tailstock for support. Having done this, continue to profile the external shape of the cup. To remove some of the bulk of the wood left, I'm using a 3/4 inch roughing out gouge. Having removed some of the bulk of wood left, continue to profile the shape required with the spindle gouge. Having achieved the required stem profile, we're now ready to continue with the spiraling. Adjust the rest so that the cutter cuts on centre line. Start the lathe so it's running at about 500 RPM. Present the tool horizontally to the stem, and as the cutter is revolving, gently raise the handle until the cutter starts to cut. Gently push for a few seconds, and this will be the reference point. Stop the lathe and check the spiral. If everything is alright, restart the lathe at about 1000 RPM. And repeat the procedure as before, traversing the cutter towards the right to continue the spiral. Having reached the end of the spiral, repeat the process until the full form of the spiral is achieved. When satisfied with the spiral, redefine the parameters of the stem. You can see that I am using a 3/4 inch oval skew to achieve the required effect. This tool is superbly balanced and makes light work of this task. When satisfied with the overall goblet shape, finish off by sanding with a fine abrasive. I'm using a 1/8 inch parting tool just to set the parameters of the base. Having applied the required finish, continue to part off. As you near the end of the parting cut, it will be necessary to support the goblet. Make sure that if you use your hand, all loose clothing and your arm is well away from the revolving chuck. Let's have a look at how we sharpen these spiraling cutters. Place the cutter vertically against a piece of revolving wood, and as the cutter revolves, use a diamond file and rub it across the single bevel. This should keep the cutter in tip-top condition. Should you severely damage the cutter, it may be necessary to use a bench grinder. Place the bevel flat against the stone and let the cutter revolve. This will restore the cutter to full working condition. The addition of spirals to your workpieces adds a whole new dimension to otherwise bland projects. Let us move on to the third topic in this video, indexing. These dramatic effects can easily be created using the Robert Sorby Universal Indexing System. The system locks the spindle so that accurate carving and drilling can be undertaken. It comprises of a disc with 24 equally spaced positions. The central hole enables the disc to be located onto the lathe spindle register. Various sizes are available to suit different lathes. It can be held in position by a wood chuck, faceplate or screw chuck. There is a clamp assembly that can be fitted to any lathe bed. The pivoting arm is set at centre height and locates into the slots on the indexing plate. The clamp assembly can then be tightened. This will hold everything in position. The pivoting arm can now be located into any one of the 24 numbered positions. It is important to point out that it should only be fitted once the profiling work has been completed. Let's use the indexing system in conjunction with a carving tool to enhance the appearance of a bowl and a vase. Let's look at adding a carved effect to a bowl made from sycamore. First of all, profile your bowl. Remove the chuck and bowl. Slide on the indexing plate and refix the chuck. This holds the plate in position. Now position the clamp assembly and locate the pivoting arm at centre height in position 1. And lock in position. We are going to carve the small raised section of the bowl using a tool rest as a guide for the carving tool. Select an appropriate carving tool. In this instance it is a Robert Sorby 1/8 inch Vena. Move the indexing unit to position 2 and continue to carve. Repeat the sequence until 24 cuts have been made. Having carved all the way round the rim, keep the indexing unit locked into position. Keep the tool rest also in its original position. Slacken the bowl and move round halfway between the two cuts. We can now carve on 24 new positions. On reaching the end, divide and carve once again. Having completed the carving, remove the chuck and bowl and disassemble the indexing unit. Reposition the chuck and the bowl. Bring up the banjo and tool rest. so we can accentuate the carved section further by using a bowl gouge with a fingernail profile to round over the raised carved band. And for the final finishing cuts, I'm using a 1/4 inch round skew in scraping mode. Finally, sand the project and apply an appropriate finish. Let's move on to carving the neck of this Mazia birch vase. With this project, instead of carving on the centre line, the tool rest is placed above centre so that the carving runs off centre. By changing the carving position and the carving tool, we can alter the visual characteristics of the project dramatically. Use exactly the same techniques as those used on the bowl. Having reached the end of the carving, divide and carve again. As in this case, carving around the neck can be used to obscure a join. When you are satisfied with the carving, clean up the edges to highlight the pattern. Once again, I'm using a 1/4 inch round skew. Sand and finish. The indexing system can also be used alongside a Robert Sorby precision boring system. It comprises of a stem which locates into the banjo tool rest holder. There are various sizes of stem to suit different types of lathe. There is a holding boss which screws onto the stem. Into this boss we can fit the hardened steel bushes. These are available in various imperial and metric sizes. The system also incorporates drills to suit the various bushes. We will use this to make an inset dowelled weed pot. Adjust the banjo and stem so we can drill on the centre line. This project is made out of steamed pear. Proceed to drill using the 3/8 inch drill bit. We're going to drill 8 equally spaced holes. This will correspond to drilling when the indexing unit is located on the 3rd, the 6th, 9th, 12th, 15th, 18th, 21st and 24th location points. Having drilled the holes, we can start to insert the dowels. These will be held in place with PVA glue. Having inserted the dowels, trim them off to within 1/8 of an inch. I'm using a hacksaw because the fine teeth prevent the dowel from splitting during the final cuts. Remove the indexing system prior to profiling the little vase. Having refixed the chuck, we are now ready to continue profiling the vase. Take gentle cuts with a spindle gouge so as not to fracture the dowels. Shape the internal section of the neck as required. Continue to profile the external shape. The fingernail profile on the end of this spindle gouge allows me to manipulate the tool with ease. The profile of the vase as it intersects across the dowels has a direct bearing on their end shape. Having achieved the required neck profile, we can drill and insert some more dowels into the body of the vase. Once again, drill on centre height, only this time we're going to use the 1/4 inch bush and drill. We will drill on exactly the same positions as we did last time. When the drilling is complete, insert the dowels and profile the external shape. When satisfied with the final profile, we can sand, polish and part off. You can use these simple devices and procedures to create some stunning effects. Let's move on to chatter work. The Robert Soulby chatter tool is used to decorate end grain projects, like these boxes. The chatter tool utilises double-ended cutters, which chatter against the work to impart a pattern. This is where the name comes from, chatter tool. The pattern is affected by three things: the length of the projection of the blade, the longer the overhang, the coarser the pattern, the speed of the rotating work, and the wood used. Dense, close-grained woods like maple, cherry and boxwood will pattern the best. Softer, more open-grained woods tend to break out on the end grain and pattern poorly. This results in little or no pattern definition. Before every use, the cutters need to be sharpened. The cutters need to have a burr to work. We can achieve this using a bench grinder. I'm using a Robert Soulby aluminium oxide grinding wheel. This method is fine for grinding the diamond point, square end and round nose section of the cutters. The bevel angle is kept at 90 degrees. The hollow end section of the cutter needs to be sharpened using a pre-formed diamond file. This is the exact shape and will keep this cutting edge in top condition. Having sharpened all of the cutters, we can proceed to clean up the end grain of the cylinder. Once again, I'm using a Robert Soulby high performance spindle gouge. We're going to use the diamond cutter. This is the most versatile of all the cutting profiles. We can drag the edge across the face. Notice this cutter, as well as the others, cut on centerline. We can use the point of the tool. We can also present a flat side to the project. All of these positions result in a different pattern. These are shown to best effect when defined and polished. To profile the edge of the coaster, I'm going to use a Robert Sorby bead forming tool. To sharpen this, rub a diamond file straight across the top section of the blade. It cuts on centerline with a trailing angle. A slight side-to-side motion may help the cut. The end result will be a perfect semicircle. To finish off, sand using a fine abrasive. Apply your finish and part off. We're now going to use the square end cutter to apply a pattern. The cutter is going to cut on centerline. Once the high-pitched squeal is heard, the pattern is already formed. We can stop and have a look. Once again, we're using a bead forming tool to form the edge. We can highlight out the pattern by containing it within two grooves. Having done this, we can sand, polish and part off. Let's have a look at using the round nose cutter. Cutting on centerline once again, it will form a patterned semicircular depression in the wood. Let's move on to using the hollow end cutter. I find it easier if I put a little V in the end of the wood. This is the start of the patterned area. It also allows one of the wings to locate into this groove and prevent any skidding. The Robert Sorby chatter tool can be used to add that special finishing touch that sets your work apart. Let's have a look at off-centre turning. Off-centre turning is used to create unique profiles. All of these have been created using the Robert Sorby eccentric chuck. It consists of a backplate. There are various sizes available for different lathes. A main body which screws onto the backplate, an eccentric boss which is held in place by two grub screws, into which can be fitted various holding devices. For the next project, a spiralling off-centre stemmed goblet, we're going to use the hexagonal screw. This locates into a bihexagonal hole in the front of the eccentric boss and is held in place by a machine screw from the back. For the next section of the video, I am going to be joined by Sid Bear, a prominent exponent of off-centre turning. Having secured the screw, the eccentric boss can be manipulated into any position. There are 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 and 35mm offset positions. You can see there is a wide range of movement. Prepare the cylinder of wood, in this instance bolted beech, drill the appropriate pilot hole and affix it to the chuck. The chuck has an offset of 0 at this stage. This acts as a standard screw chuck. You will notice that the tailstock is brought up to provide additional support during the profiling cuts. Once again we are using a Robert Sorby high performance spindle gouge to part turn the external profile of the goblet cup. Having part turned the external shape, profile the internal section. The final finishing cuts are being made with a Robert Sorby 45° shear scraper. This is an ideal tool for the novice as the presentation angle of the cutter prevents catches during the cut. This tool produces a finish that will require little or no sanding. Having completed the finishing cuts, sand and apply an appropriate finish. A good example of this would be Robert Sorby Universal Lacquer. We can now finish the outside of the goblet cup. We are using a Robert Sorby 3/16 inch diamond parting tool to create the intersection between the cup and the stem. When ready, finish the goblet cup. When you are happy with the shape, we can start turning the stem. First of all, undo the 2 grub screws. Move the eccentric boss from the 0 to the 5mm offset position and retighten the grub screws to lock the boss in position. You can see this is now off center, and to prevent excessive vibration we will be turning the rest of the goblet at a low speed, somewhere around about 500 RPM. Bring the rest up as close as possible to the work. Revolve the work by hand to make sure that it doesn't foul the rest. Having achieved this, take the diamond parting tool once again and part down. We're going to create a series of stepped platforms. Each of the platforms is 3/16 of an inch in depth and 3/8 of an inch in width. Having done this, stop the lathe and remove the eccentric boss. Put a small mark at the 35mm position on the wood. Undo the machine screw. Draw an arrow to indicate the direction that you're going to move the offset boss. Having done this, remove and relocate the hexagonal screw one position round. And reaffix the machine screw. Refix the eccentric boss in the 10mm position. You can see we're even further off centre than before. Reposition the tool rest and part down to create a new disc. This needs to be identical in size to the previous one. We've now created the first two discs of the stem. Just to ensure that everything's correct, use calipers to gauge the size. Remove the eccentric boss from the chuck body and rotate the screw round one position further in the bihexagonal hole. Refix and reposition in the 10mm offset position and create the next disc. By keeping the offset value at 10 and repositioning the bihexagonal screw round one position each time, we create a spiral in the stem. This will look similar in appearance to that of a spiral staircase. By repeating the process, we can see this quite clearly. The stem has taken on an appearance similar to a spiral staircase. Continue cutting the discs and moving round one position in the bihexagonal hole each time until you reach the required length of stem. To finish the goblet stem, move the screw round one position in the bihexagonal hole. Tighten up the machine screw to secure. This time reposition the eccentric boss with a 5mm offset. Tighten the little grub screws and turn the next disc. You may have noticed that no attempt has been made at sanding the stem. The practice of putting your hand into an off-centre piece of turning is potentially dangerous. The sanding of the stem can be completed after turning. Use the calipers once again to check the size of the disc. Once again, move round one position in the bihexagonal hole. This time refix the eccentric boss with a 0 offset. Having done this, we can cut the final disc on the stem. The stem at this stage is very fragile, so care must be taken. It's not quite the right size. Small finishing cut will rectify that. Using the high performance spindle gouge, we can now profile the base. Very delicate cuts are being taken to blend the two profiles together. When you're fully satisfied with the overall shape, proceed to part off the base. To support the goblet in the final stages of this cut, gently hold on to the goblet cup, but keep the arm and the sleeves well away from the chuck and the work. I think we'll call this project a quirky goblet. So the next project is a bizarre bowl with a cloverleaf motif. First of all, drill your pilot's hole and fix it to the screw. The offset value is 0. This will enable us to turn the outside of the bowl. The wood being used is Luan, which is a sustainable substitute for mahogany. In this instance, we're using a Robert Sorby high performance bowl gouge. When satisfied with the external wall shape, proceed to turn the bottom of the bowl. The fingernail profile on the end of this gouge allows us to make a pulling cut safely. The advantage of this type of cut is that the handle is kept well away from the bed bars. Because this is a bigger project, we're going to use the faceplate to secure this to the chuck. First of all, stop the lathe. Measure the exact diameter of the faceplate using a pair of dividers. Restart the lathe and use the dividers to scribe a line the exact diameter of the faceplate. Only allow the left-hand point of the dividers to come into contact with the revolving wood. Otherwise, there is a risk of the dividers grabbing and spinning in your hand. When the wood is marked, take a parting tool and cut down about 1/8 of an inch and remove the rest of the shallow recess. This will ensure absolute concentricity when fixing the faceplate. It is worth remembering that the bowl will at some stage during the turning be extremely out of balance, so a good fixing is absolutely vital. Having fixed the faceplate, remove the bowl from the screw chuck and mark the faceplate at 120-degree intervals and number them 1, 2 and 3. These will be the reference positions to create the 3 parts of the cloverleaf motif. A variation of this could be 6 positions, so that we can create a scalloped effect bowl. Undo the 2 grub screws and remove the eccentric boss. Take out the screw and locate the eccentric boss onto the faceplate, aligning the reference mark 1 on the faceplate with a 35mm offset on the boss. Locate the boss back into the eccentric chuck with a 0 offset. bring up the tool rest and clean up the face of the bowl using a bowl gouge. Having cleaned the face of the bowl, take a pencil and scribe a line 3/8 of an inch from the edge. This will be the outermost limit of the cloverleaf design that we're going to turn. Undo the 2 grub screws and move the eccentric boss round and refix with an offset value of 30mm. It is always advisable to rotate the work by hand after setting the offset value to ensure that the now off-centre bowl does not foul the bed bars. Having made certain of this, start the lathe up at a very low speed, somewhere around about 450 RPM. Once again, take a pencil and scribe a line over the existing pencil mark. This defines the parameters of the first section of the pattern. Use a bowl gouge to remove the first leaf section of the design. The lathe speed is low, so this will take a little time to achieve. Remember, there are screws in the back of this bowl, so don't make the sections too deep. This is the first leaf completed. We can now move on to the second clover leaf. Remove the eccentric boss and move the 35mm offset value round to position 2. Refix with a machine screw. And refix on the lathe with a 30mm offset. Once again, use a pencil to mark the second section and proceed to turn this section. It's going to get a little bit jumpy as you're blending this profile in with the first section of the cloverleaf design. For the final part of the cloverleaf, remove the eccentric boss, align the 35mm line with the third 120° mark and refix with a 30mm offset value, and proceed to turn the last area. You can see a rough area on the right hand side of the bowl. A few more cuts will blend this leaf with the others and give a uniform profile. We need to be careful with these cuts so as not to break the grain along the intersecting ridges. Once the pattern is formed, we need to sand each section of the cloverleaf design whilst the lathe is stationary. This will ensure that we do not blur the ridges. After sanding, reposition the eccentric boss with a 0 offset value and proceed to turn a small dimple in the centre of the bowl. This is the final part of the cloverleaf. Restart the lathe and tidy up the top of the bowl. This will remove the pencil marks and leave clean, crisp edges. When the lathe is stationary, you can apply an appropriate finish. Off-centre turning can be used to create some wonderful designs. These are just two examples of the many projects possible using the Robert Sorby eccentric chuck. Let's have a look at some other ideas and designs using the tools seen in this video. This honey dipper has been created using the spiralling tool in beading mode. This is where the cutter has no offset and is presented horizontally to the work and traversed left and right. This produces uniform width beads. The 4mm cutter was not used to its full cutting depth, so we have ended up with flat tops on the beads. This technique of not cutting to full depth can be shown to good effect on this goblet stem made out of purple heart. Alternatively, if the cutters are used to the full depth, as with this bowl, the beads are radically altered. Round tops are shown to good effect on this corkscrew. You will notice that there are both left and right-handed spirals. An extension of this technique is checkering or cross-hatching. This is shown clearly on this sycamore bowl. A 2mm spiralling cutter was used, and what would have been a fairly mundane piece has been transformed by the addition of a checkered band close to the rim. This pineapple effect is formed by simply running a left-hand spiral over the top of a right-hand spiral. The pattern has been further highlighted because the checkering is raised from the main body of the bowl. This Cocobolo pen was checkered with the 2mm cutter also. It not only enhances the pen visually, but the checkering also acts as a non-slip grip. The universal indexing system can be used to create different patterns, as with this bowl. The rim has been carved off-centre, just to create a bit more visual impact. When inset doweling, give a little thought to the dowels and main timber selected. When there is a high contrast between the woods, the effects can be quite striking. A variation on this theme is precision boring and not insert doweling. An example of this is this pomander. When filled with potpourri, the holes allow the full aroma to permeate through. When off-centre turning, try using different shapes for the platforms on the stem. For a further variation, a hollow form was turned instead of a goblet head. The wood used for this project was laburnum. All of the finishes used in this video were part of the Robert Sorby range of finishing products. Danish oil is a very versatile finish. It is water and heat resistant and penetrates deeply to protect the wood. It finishes to a soft satin luster that is not oily to the touch. Lemon oil is a perfect finish for projects requiring a natural matte finish. This oil does not darken the wood, so the true beauty of the grain will be shown to its fullest effect. Universal lacquer is a melamine finish. It imparts a tough, water, acid and heat resistant finish and is excellent for projects requiring a high degree of protection. It can be buffed to a high polish. Friction polish seals and polishes in one operation. It is used on projects where a very high gloss finish is required, for example eggs, boxes and goblets. Robert Sorby paste wax feeds the wood whilst imparting a beautiful finish. Its high build formulation makes it ideal for both treated and bare timbers. The wax stick is a blend of waxes that is applied to the work whilst it is revolving. Then it is buffed to produce a high gloss, satin or matte finish depending on the pressure exerted during the buffing process. It can be used on both spindle and bowl work. All of the projects in this video are designed to encourage and inspire you to push the boundaries of wood turning forward. Experiment, and above all, have fun.
Welcome to the new decorating video from Robert Sorby. These beautifully decorated items were produced by guest presenter, renowned wood-turning artist Nick Agar, using the original high-quality, full-size and micro spiralling and texturing tools from Robert Sorby. If you would like to produce your own version of Nick's stunning Viking sunset bowl, or just decorate your own turn pieces, then watch this video to learn the various techniques that he uses.
Hi, Nick Agar here, and you're joining me at Robert Sorby headquarters in Sheffield, England, where today I'm going to share with you how we get even more from these wonderful spiralling and texturing tools. So I'm using the 3/8 spindle gouge. I'm just going to take a cut from the top, following down to the centre of the spindle, preparing the surface that we're going to texture. As it's cut so beautifully and shiny, I'm actually going to sand that a little bit so that I have an opaque background so that you can see the texture more clearly. That'll be fine. We're going to decorate this surface with the micro spiraling tool. I'm going to take off the attachment which allows us to fix the head at a given angle. I'm also going to use the optional longer handle as I prefer to have a little bit more to hold on to during this operation. I'm going to put the face that is beveled towards the wood, and I've done it up with the little screw at the back against the flatter side of the wheel. This gives me a lot more space to work in without the nut getting in my way. Speed of the lathe is going to be set under 500 RPM. Starting in the centre, I'm going to pivot on, hold it there, count to 5. I'm then going to move across in steps, and I'm going to slowly open up the angle, tipping the wheel slightly further across as we make our way across, and you'll see it actually develops a little bit of a spiral across the surface. Just burnish off the surface there, take away some of those fuzzy torn grains, and now we have a spiral pattern created by the tool. We're going to now texture the surface again, only this time we're going to use all 3 of the available cutters. These 2 come initially with the kit, and this is the texturing wheel, which is an available option. As before, I'm going to have the lathe running at around 500 RPM. I'm going to start with the smallest tooth cutter and just fractionally back away from the centre. The nut is loaded to the outside, and I'm going to slowly pivot on, and hopefully we'll get a beautiful tiny little delicate flower in the centre. Let's just have a look at that. There, fantastic. Now I'm going to move up to the slightly bigger teeth. You can see the difference here. Facing the wood about 45 degrees, pivot on to the outside of that design. Learning the pressure and the amount you have to push onto the wood is just a thing of practice and experience, but it is easy, and if you do make a mistake, it's only 1 or 2 cuts away from giving it another go. Now I'm going to use the smaller and double-sided texturing wheel to fill in this little area before I complete the job back again with this one on the outside. This time I'm going to be moving the tool backwards and forwards. So this is now beveled on both sides. Once more, the nut is out of my way, making sure I've got room between the tool rest and the wood, and I'm going to bring myself more in line with the timber surface and drag this backwards and forwards. This will give me more of an orange peel effect, but by keeping the wheel more upright, I don't damage the fibres of the wood. To complete the job in the same orientation, I'm going to push this cutter in and again burnish the surface with some shavings just to break off any fibres. Let's have a look at what we've got. Stunning. So you can imagine if you're making the lid of a box a pendant, even perhaps a table mat, then this is going to really ramp up the design opportunities you'll get with this tool. Now you can see by adding some colour we've really enhanced the effect we've created with that mini spiralling tool. Moving on from the smaller version to the now larger version of the spiralling and texturing system, we have a greater variety of cutters available in pitches of 2, 4, 5, 6 and 11. Also the texturing cutter which is beveled on both sides. I'm now going to use the 4mm cutter, but I need to now remove the rest from the spiralling system, return it to the sovereign handpiece, and I've loaded the nut so that it's on the right hand side, the flat side of the wheel. The beveled side is going to be facing the wood. Now I've taken the rest off, I've got more freedom to move the tool at different angles as I pass across the surface. I've set the tool rest up so that we're on the centre line of rotation, and I've got plenty of room behind the tool rest so that I can rest my hand over the top and pivot onto the moving wood. I don't need to worry about my hand being close because in forward rotation the wheel is spinning away from my hand, so I'm quite safe. Lathe speed, I run at around 1000 RPM for the bigger cutter, and we're going to pivot in, not quite in the centre here, hold it still, and as I move across the face I'm going to slowly open up and change the angle backwards and forwards that the teeth are applied to the surface. So upright, slightly more over to the right, slightly more, back again, and almost upright and facing the wood. This time, for a little more variety, I'm going to use these 3 cutters, the 2, the 4 and the texturing cutter. Starting in the centre, pivoting in with the tool upright, I need to slow the lathe down to around 1000 or below, pivoting in just away from the centre, hold, now I'm going to move out. Give another pattern around that one. Back out again, returning to the upright position. I'm now going to move up to the number 4 cutter with a slightly bigger pitch. Pivoting in upright. Moving over. Further over still. Now to the texturing wheel. And importantly, this one needs to stay upright as it will tear the grain in the wood if I try operating it in the same way I just did with the previous cutter. So this one is presented face on, and I'm going to move it backwards and forwards. And to finish off, I'm going to push straight on with the number 4. Now with the addition of some colour, you can really see how strong that design is. Using the 4mm cutter again, I'm now going to present it to the wood in an upright position, but I'm going to bring it towards me whilst rotating and slowly open the cut up so that I produce a spiral. Once again, the speed of the lathe is below 1000 RPM. Hand over the top, pivoting in till I get the pressure, and then I draw towards me and I stop at the end. This time, using the number 5 cutter, I'm going to pivot from around about the 2 o'clock angle and moving across the wooden surface to an upright position, leaving a pattern. Now with the addition of some colour, you can really see how strong that design is. Let's decorate the bottom of a simple bowl now using all the tools in front of me, starting off with the smallest cutter, and I'm going to just do a little detail in the bottom of the foot of the bowl as if it would be the underneath, the piece you don't look at very often but is important when you do look at it. Following up the side of the bowl, putting the tool at different angles and changing up the variety of cutters as we go in stages. So the first one at a lower speed of around 500 or below is going to be just a small detail on the underneath. Now we have to remember this time we have side grain and end grain in the direction of the wood hitting the surface of the cutter. So the end grain here and here, the side grain here and here. We can't therefore open up the tool too wide an angle because it will damage the grain more. So I'm going to suggest we go between upright and about 2 o'clock at the furthest rotation. Any movement facing the wood until we run out of an edge is appropriate. Hand over the top, pivoting in. Just give myself a small detail to outline the foot of the bowl. I'm now going to move to the larger pitch on the micro spiraling system, and just on this shape of the foot, push in carefully, slow the speed down a little bit more. It's a nice sharp edge. It sounds right, it sounds smooth, I know that's okay. Stop and have a quick look. You can see a nice floral pattern coming around the edge. I'm now going to use the bigger wheel and promote it at about 1 o'clock. Just outline in an upright position. Now I'm going to move up through the 2, 4, 5 and 6 cutters coming up the surface. First one, upright, lead over about 1 o'clock, and then 2 o'clock. Outline where I've done with another upright to the number 4. Upright, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, outline it with an upright again. Number 5, upright, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, outline it again. And with this one, I'm now going to present the tool facing the wood and levering from underneath, press hard against the surface. Bit of a noisy job, that one. Moving on to this top area of the bowl, I'm now going to use the texturing cutter, and I'm going to keep it adjacent to the shape, but I'm going to move it up and down the surface, being careful not to fall off the edge. Just let it follow into its own footprints. Don't forget to burnish. Let's see how it looks. Now with the addition of some colour, you can really see how strong that design is.
The original high-quality full-size and micro-spiraling and texturing tools, along with all Robert Sorby products, are available from all main Robert Sorby dealers worldwide, a list of which can be found on our website. For more videos on a large selection of Robert Sorby products, go to our website or visit our YouTube channel.